Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. We are going to put on our history professor hats, step right into the dusty sandals of an ancient traveler, and uncover exactly how the incredible Indian subcontinent got its many, many names. I mean, have you ever really stopped to wonder how a massive, incredibly diverse landmass ends up being known by just a single word? Well, the journey to the names we use today is just a fascinating tale. It's a mix of geography, ancient texts, and honestly, a bunch of awestruck foreign travelers. So let's just jump right in.
Okay, let's actually start by tossing out our modern maps for a second and asking a pretty fundamental question. How do we define India? Today, we think of it as a modern nation. Well, actually, we think of it as defined by strict political borders, defined states, and a census-tracked population. But if you rewind the clock, say 500, 2000, or even 5,000 years ago, none of those political lines existed. No way. To understand the names of the past, we have to really understand the geography of the past.
So, here is our ancient travel itinerary. We're going to cover mapping the ancient land, Jambudvipa and its native roots, the evolution of Bharat, the river Sindhu's legacy, cross-cultural naming perspectives, and finally, India that is Bharat. Starting off with Section 1, Mapping the Ancient Land. Imagine you're standing right in the middle of the subcontinent thousands of years ago. You're trying to describe the sheer, mind-boggling scale of the land around you to someone who has literally never been there. Our ancestors actually solved this brilliantly. The ancient text, the Vishnu Purana, states perfectly. The country that lies north of the ocean and south of the snowy mountains is called Bharata. It is so simple, yet absolutely profound. Long before a single political line was ever drawn on parchment, geography itself, specifically those towering, snowy Himalayas up north and the vast oceans down south, dictated the identity of the entire region. But, before one single name united that whole geographic expanse, our ancient traveler would have had to cross through some highly distinct, totally self-contained territories. The ancient epic, the Mahabharata, gives us a fantastic snapshot of this. It lists these specific, unique regions, places like Kashmira in the north, Kurukshetra, Vanga in the east, Pragjyotisha, Kacha in the west, all the way down to Kerala in the extreme south. These were distinct kingdoms covering the map, which just goes to show how incredibly diverse the land was, even back then.
Moving on to Section 2, Jambudvipa, the native roots. We see this really early identity beautifully reflected in the name Jambudvipa. It literally translates to the island of the fruit of the jamun tree. And the jamun is just a very common plum tree native to India. Think about how amazing that is for a second. The overarching name for this massive expanse of land wasn't based on some fierce warlord, human conquest, or a political empire. It was deeply, inherently rooted in native agriculture and the very earth of the subcontinent.
And this wasn't just some poetic term people used in passing either. By about 250 BCE, the great Indian emperor Ashoka used the term Jambudvipa in his famous stone inscriptions to describe his empire. To put that scale into perspective, his Jambudvipa was absolutely massive, encompassing borders shifting far beyond our modern maps, including what is today modern India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and even stretching right into parts of Afghanistan. It was this vast, united, natural island of the Jamun tree.
Let's hit Section 3, The Evolution of Bharat. Think of this timeline as our historical travel journal, capturing exactly when these different overarching identities were first documented. We start way back with Sapta Sindhava in the ancient Rigveda era. Then, moving into the centuries BCE, during the Mahabharata era, we see the rise of Jambudvipa and Bharatavarsha. And later on, roughly 1800 years ago, Hindustan emerges in Persian inscriptions.
So here is the real kicker about how the term Bharat actually grew. Originally, in India's oldest text, the Rig Veda, Bharata didn't mean the whole country at all. It just referred to one of the main Vedic groups of people, a specific cultural group. But over time, the term Bharatavarsha came to mean the country of the Bharatas. It evolved from this one specific group into a ubiquitous native name used across the entire subcontinent. It spread like wildfire, surviving to this very day as Bharat in the north and Bharatam in the south.
All right, Section 4, The River Sindhu's Legacy.
Before foreigners ever arrived, the natives themselves defined the northwest region by its life-giving water. In the Rig Veda, this area was called Sapta Sindhava, which means the land of the seven rivers. And the anchor of this entire river system was the mighty Sindhu River, which today we know as the Indus River. The word Sindhu was about to embark on an incredible linguistic journey across the globe.
This original river name basically went through a giant game of historical telephone over centuries of foreign contact. In the 6th century BCE, invading Persians encountered the Sindhu River. In their language, they adapted Sindhu to Hindu or Hindu, which was a purely geographical term for the river region. Later, the ancient Greeks came along, using the Persian records. But the Greeks didn't have an H sound in their language, so they just dropped it completely, transforming Hindo into Indoi or Indike. And speaking of the Persians, here is a pretty wild historical fact. The term Hindustan, which we so often associate with much later historical empires, actually emerged from ancient Persian stone inscriptions roughly 1,800 years ago. It was later adopted by various groups entering the subcontinent, for sure, but its roots are ancient and directly tied to that initial phonetic shift from Sindhu to Hindu.
Section 5. Cross-cultural naming perspectives. Just like the Greeks and Persians, ancient Chinese scholars interacted deeply with the subcontinent. A very famous pilgrim named Xuanzang actually traveled through India for 17 years in the 7th century. Through these interactions, the Chinese also adapted the word Sindhu phonetically. The progression went from Sindhu to Hindu to Indu, eventually arriving at the Chinese terms Yindu or Yintu.
There is a profound contrast when we put these different origins side by side. On one hand, you have Indian roots, Jambudvipa and Bharat, which looked inward. They derived their identity from native nature, like the jamun tree, and internal cultural groups. But on the other hand, Chinese accounts used Yindu, a phonetic river translation, but also a really beautiful term, Tianju. Tianju can be understood as heavenly master, which reflects the deep religious reverence the Chinese had for India as the sacred land of the Buddha.
And finally, Section 6. India, that is Bharat.
So what does this all mean? It really boils down to this incredible dual identity. Bharat is our inward-looking name. It was born internally from the earth, the indigenous culture, and Vedic history. India, on the other hand, is our outward-looking name. It was given externally by awestruck foreign travelers, Persians, Greeks, and beyond, who were captivated by the geographic boundary of the mighty Sindhu River. And the absolute brilliance of this history is how it was handled in 1950. The drafters of the modern Constitution didn't just pick one and toss the other. Right at the very beginning of the newly formed Constitution, they flawlessly bridged these inward and outward viewpoints with the opening phrase, India, that is Bharat. It's two incredible historical journeys, native and foreign, locked together in a single foundational document. Which leaves us with a fascinating final thought for you to ponder. Think about your own home. If you were an ancient traveler tasked with naming your country before maps or borders even existed, what natural landmark, what river, tree, or mountain would you name it after? How does the physical earth around you shape your fundamental identity? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking those great questions, and I'll catch you next time.